the record. Okay, welcome everyone. Today is our second time on the Confucius Analects, book 19. And last week we finished to chapter 5. And I believe today we probably can finish to chapter 1. Hope we finish to 50. I don't know, So, and then next time we can probably take one or two sections to finish book 19. Then we can finish book 20, only 3 chapters. And the book 20, we only need 1 meeting, we can finish. So let's start from, as I mentioned, book 19 is all about Confucius' disciples. So we start with Zhang, and then we go into the second disciple, Zhang. Okay, so last week we finished book 19, chapter 5, and today we will start from chapter 6. So I assume Kwang would like to read Dr. Eno's translation, if you don't mind, please.
Of course. So, translation by Professor Eno, 19.6. Zixia said, to study broadly and deepen one's resolve, to question closely and reflect on things near at hand, runs, lies therein.
Thank you, Kwang. Okay, so let me share the translation. We have just 1 minute. Let me see. Okay, here.
Excellent.
Okay, chapter 6.
Book 19, chapter 6. Zisha said, to learn broadly, to make one's inspiration sincere, to ask what is pressing and to think of what is nearby, run lies therein.
Thank you, Amam. I think this one is quite simple, and as we mentioned, Zixia probably is a very start from the detail and then more conservative and careful person. That's my observation. Okay, and then so he said to learn broadly and 博学. Okay, sometimes you translate it as erudite. Okay, and then 笃志 sincere your inspiration. And I think, to me, important thing is what is present and to think what is nearby. 切问而近思. I think this one very much reflects Zixia personality, because he want to do things, study very solid, ask the present, what is present, okay. In another way, he probably not interested in the too virtual question or too metaphysical question, okay. And you will think about like how to deal with your senior, okay. That's the way. Start from low, small thing. That's my interpretation. So I like to hear what Aman think about it.
Thank you, Jason. I can't help but when we're reading this be reminded of something I said way back at the start when we began the Analects. For me, to study the Analects, it is always helpful to think of the cast of characters like the cast of The Simpsons. It's just an ever-expanding group of people with unique and interesting personalities. And they all have their own stories. Zisha is this very bookish, careful, somewhat reticent person who I just see as persuadable. He's easily been pushed around. And so his advice, Confucius' advice to Zisha, way back in chapter 6, thou shalt be a junsa scholar, not the scholar for small men, is indicative of how he is so, he is the character who cannot see the forest for the trees. He's too busy looking in the minutia. So what is he saying here? Learn broadly. That was his master's advice. You've got to stop, narrow focus, just working on your calligraphy. Just remember, you need to study all of this. You need to become inspired to learn for its own sake, not to perfect it, but to learn for its own sake. And here, what he's giving his students is his rendition of how Ren is developed. I think of this in two different ways. One person who is this character is the Shah, who needs to develop it, you could say, from the inside out and break away sort of those shackles of careful trudging. And Zhang, who is much more of the, we'd call them a hands-on learner, somebody who will go out and do. And so the lessons for him had to be imported externally to internally. I get a lot of that tone in this chapter. In Zisha's rendering of how one gains Ren, it's very much the introvert's path to Ren, as opposed to the extrovert's path to Ren.
Thank you, Amam. Okay, so let's have a brief discussion on this chapter. You can share what you think or what you have question or sharing. Kwang, please.
Okay, so my take on Zhu Xia is a lot influenced by the fact that he has been at the origin of the Kongyang interpretation of the Chunqiu. Let's not forget that, once again, I won't bother everyone with that, but that is the absolute peak of Confucianism, the absolute summit of Confucianism. Because if Confucianism is not a mere school of rituals, but truly the school for aristocratic education for the Chinese Empire during 21 centuries, it's not only because of Zhu Xia, of course, but let's say that it's a lot because of him. So once again, the three schools of interpretations of the Chunqiu, spring and autumn. Once again, the spring and autumn is simply the very boring chronicles of the Lu Principality over about 250 years. Okay, let's say 222 BCE, 722 BCE to more or less, let's say 481 BCE. So that boring part is not important because the Confucianist school took it as a kind of excuse or a springboard to write their own reflections on the art of governance. And it gives rise to three interpretations. The first one, the Zuo Chuan. Why the Zuo Chuan? Because it's a transmission of a certain guy, which the family name is Zuo, Z-U-O, pronounced at the third tone. And that Zuo Chuan is about realpolitik and history. The other guy is named Ku Liang, and it's more about rituals and organization of a society. But the ultimate achievement is truly the Kongyang school, meaning the name of Zhu Xia's student who transmitted to his family, and that thought has been written down only many centuries later at the beginning of the Han Dynasty. So that Kongyang interpretation is about universal history. It's about how, and that 19.6 is about that precisely. It's about how you will make justice and powers be integrated. Because once again, if you only have justice but you don't have power, you're useless. If you don't have power but you don't have justice, you're just a tyrant. So you need power and justice together. And that is precisely the Kongyang interpretation, which is the absolute summit of the Confucianist school in terms of a long-term project for the many centuries to come. I put myself at the perspective of Confucius, of Zhu Xia, and of the Han Dynasty. Let's not forget that the Han Dynasty is 22 centuries ago. So the project is still ongoing. So Zixia said to study broadly and deepen one's resolve. Once again, learning is about learning information, learning know-how, and learning being. So to study broadly or to learn broadly is precisely that. It's not only to learn information, it's not only to learn know-how, it's to learn being and deepen one's resolve, okay? Because it's only with being that you're capable to have resolve and to have the capacity to decide in practical situation, to question closely and reflect on things near at hand, okay? So once again, you have the learning part, but you also have the practical part, okay? You have the upper trigram part, but you also have the lower trigram part, okay? You study not just for fun, even if in the Confucianist school, studying is a fun thing, but it's not only for fun, it's to reflect and on things near at hand, and run lies therein, in the sense that run, once again, is a very simple character, is, yeah, sure. Okay, to answer to Mark's question, I will write the name Gong Yang after. So run is precisely a person with number two, okay? Meaning that we are always in interactions with other human beings, not only another one, it can be 200 or 2,000 or 1 million, but there's always interactions between you and another human beings, and you are many. Oh, thank you, Jason. Jason just wrote Gong Yang.
The male sheep. So
yeah, exactly. And that is precisely that run. So that very short, the paragraph 19.6 is truly the Confucianist program in terms of universal history. And it's three Chinese characters that I will write in the chat after, unless Jason would be faster than me. It would be Da Yi Tong. Okay, Da Yi Tong means the great union. And what is that great union? That great union is the union of power and justice. If you learn, it's to make the union between power and justice, because once again, if you have power but no justice, you will be a tyrant. But if you have justice but no power, you're just a useless nerd. So you need power and justice. I stop here my long speech.
thank you, Kwang. Any other comment about this one or questions?
Nick, I'll let Nick go first. Go ahead.
Okay, Nick, please.
No, go ahead, Alan.
No, I
go
just
first.
wanted to emphasize what Quan had said about learning broadly being about learning being, and that Zixia as a student was somebody who needed those lessons more heavily driven into him because he was too technocratic, too much of a detail-oriented bookish nerd, and it's nice to see the culmination. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, before go Nick, and then I appreciate Kwang talk about the Chunqiu. This one I just give warning. If you are not ready, don't get involved to reading that. It's just like Kwang said, it's very boring text. Okay, Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to put this verse in context. I mean, the meaning of the verse is quite straightforward. As you can see, it has a very strong pedagogical connotation in it, and therefore, the influence of it in Chinese culture could be best illustrated by the fact that one of the top universities today in China take it as its motto. You know, the top university usually have a motto, like Harvard has Veritas as its motto. But the University of Fudan in Shanghai, it's not the very best, but it's one of the best university in China. It would be something like the Columbia of China, maybe. And its motto is exactly this citation. Yeah.
So what's the motto? I don't know. Nick.
Motto is like the slogan for the mission statement of a university.
Yeah. What's the motto of Fudan? That's my question.
It's exactly the first 10 characters here.
国学而笃志，切问而近思. That's the 10 words motto.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any okay, Paul, please.
Yeah, I want to point out what I consider the value of the emphasis Aman, I think mostly, but all of you to some degree have put over, as we've studied these, that I never would have picked up by reading it, on what my mind interprets as a choosing of disciples or students, I guess disciples are wrong, just say students of Confucius that are sort of hand-picked. This may or may not be true, to have the variety of personality characteristics that allowed him to make his teachings accessible and not put it into the mold that a lot of modern teaching has fallen into, is you have to have a certain kind of brain with a certain orientation toward intellectuality to learn. And these famous teachings go like, if you're a big picture thinker, here's what you need. You're not better than the detail-oriented guy. You need this set of things. If you're a very detail-oriented guy, and these are thinking styles we've learned from neurological research, they exist, then here's what you need. And somehow Confucius recognized that and picked students that had the different proclivities so he could bring out all the different ways that you might need to learn what he's getting at. So I have a high respect for that.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think I totally agree with you. But I'm not sure it's Confucius handpick or a certain kind of, I think he probably will accept any kind of student. And when this time I read through word by word, I do see his greatness. Not necessarily I all agree with Confucius' teaching, but basically you can see different variety of the student. And you can see that's the great part as a teacher. Thank you.
That, and I wanted to point out, Paul, that is a function of Confucius' own Ren, his recognition of an individual other unique. It makes him uniquely teach them. I keep talking about Ren all the time now, but I tell people the real foundation I feel is under there is, but for you am I. And so even with his students, but for you, the way you are, therefore I must be the way I must be.
Thank you, Mark. We have Mark and Joe, I believe. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. If the character for Ren is about relations and relationality, why is that not mentioned here? There's nothing about other people, really. I know that in book 1, chapter 2, he talks about Ren being rooted in character and so on. What would you say?
Thank you, Mark. I think it's a very challenging question. Okay, yeah. If we only limit on this sentence, why that's nothing with other people. But I think that's my own interpretation. The key is ask what is present and think what is nearby. So we assume we are living with other people. Okay, in home with your parents, with your children, go to work with your coworker, your boss, your superior, your subordinate. So that's the praising question. That's the nearby. What is nearby? I think that's what he's talking about. He's not talking about far away, in America, and think about what's going on in Argentina. Okay, so we think about our praising question. That's my own interpretation, but I'm happy to hear other people think. Joe and Kwang. Joe, please.
Just really quickly, I just read the translation. I did not get to see your translation, so apologies. So I was a few minutes late. But with that even being the case, it's the idea. In the translation that I read, they use the word sincerity. So being earnest as to in your learning. So I think that's really just one of those things that's absolutely important as far as understanding the self. So that it's being honest with yourself, and then once you understand that, you have a understanding of the deficiencies that you have, and then what happens is that does allow you to interact with others in a more meaningful way, because what happens is that I then realize that I don't do things in isolation. I do things in relationship to other people, so that those relationships are actually then more meaningful, because you see how other individuals actually complement you. So getting back to Paul's example, the detailed person or the big picture person, and how those two interrelate, that there's this connection that can happen, even though they're fundamentally kind of different in how they are actually what they're good at. So anyway, I think that this is and that what that does is that enables virtue. Because what happens is you don't necessarily undervalue or overvalue yourself, that there's an element of correct measure that comes into that. So with that, your interactions are actually more just. So anyway, that's just a quick thought considering number 6.
Thank you, Joe. We have a Kwang and a Kevin, please.
I would like to come back to the quintessential character of the Chinese writing system. When you see the word or the character ran in Chinese, you see the radical for people, and you see two. So the fact that there's no need in Chinese when the character ran appears to talk about specific people, because of the quintessential quality of the Chinese writing system. So when you see that, it means immediately that it's about relations among people, and the rest is a repetition of what Jason already said. When it's about reflection on things near at hand, and to study broadly and deepen one's resolve, it is obvious for me that it's about helping others that are in your immediate surroundings. Okay, but I would say that my contribution is to remind everyone that Chinese is not English. So when you see the character, the semant, well, here I'm a little bit biased. I hope I'm not too much biased, but the writing system of Chinese is such that the character has a much broader semantic field than the languages that are written with alphabets. I stop here.
Yeah, I think the Kwang is, at least in my opinion, is not biased. It's it's not phonic, so it's not represent sound. So Kwang will speak his own dialogue, I speak my dialogue, but we meant the same thing. We pronounce totally different way. So that's the situation of a Chinese character. Kevin, please.
Yes, thank you. Especially Mark's question, and yes, the syntax of Chinese is And grammar is different, Western. Normally we need a full sentence, right? Grammatically. But here, for example, if I understand specific for this, learn broadly. Where do you learn from? Book. You talk to another person, another character in the book. And also you ask, right? Ask closely. Ask yourself after the read, or ask your neighbors, your close friend, some that and deeper even, 切问. And also then I would say then is doesn't mean that's another one. In Chinese, metaphorically, not just a person. That could be learned from nature, from the other activity, event, even, I don't know, the coat, animal. So it's just inspired. That's a great question, make me think deeper. We learn everywhere from ourselves and others, and book. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so
The only thing I have to add is Mark's question emphasizes my point that this is lessons in Ren from an introvert, because he would not necessarily as explicitly state the social aspect of it. It's just implied. But if Zhang was to be asked this, it would spend time with your friends, go out and, be active in your, it would be a very different sort of Ren that he would espouse.
I
Thank
add
you,
2 points here, sorry, but the first is in Chinese, normally subject ignore the default, you can from meaning, maybe it's we or I, and also object, like this case, who do you ask or think? So that's ignore, you think yourself. The second point I want to make is lack ideological or from the worst or educated or uneducated, less comparative, learn from everywhere you can see. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So let's move on to the next chapter, chapter 7. Kwang, please.
Translation by Professor Robert Eno, 19.7. Zhixia said, artisans of all types dwell in their workshops to master their crafts. The Junzi studies to perfect his style.
Thank you, Kwang. Anyone want to read a different version?
Sure, I can read the leggy.
Yeah, I was gonna, okay.
Okay, please, Mark.
Or you want it, Joe, you read it. Go ahead.
Are you sure? Okay. Zha said, I don't know. Yeah, that's a very difficult name. Mechanics
Zisha.
have their Zisha. Thank you. Mechanics have their shops to dwell in. In order to accomplish their work, the superior man learns in order to reach the utmost of his principles.
Okay, Amang, please.
Excuse me. Book 19, Chapter 7. Zisha said, all craftsmen complete their work in workshops. A Junzi reaches the Tao by learning.
Thank you, Amang. That's a very short one, but I think the message is quite clear, because the craftsmen who makes things, okay, they do it 居士, they stay in their shop, okay, to do their work, complete their work. And the 君子 is different, okay. Well, you can say similar way, but 君子 is doing 道 by learning, okay, 学以致其道. So we can check back with chapter 4, right? 子夏 said, same person, right? Even the minor Dao, okay, here he meant the technique, okay, techno, okay, if you want to use Greek, ancient Greek word like art. Okay, that's why Dr. Eno translates artisans, right? And there can be something still worthy to learning, but if you do it too much, you will bog down. Okay, for 君子 do not do that. So as we know, Zixia is more on the higher, okay, aristocratic people. Okay, so he kind of have elitist thinking or his social status thinking. So he think about 君子 is doing different. It's just like Confucius said, the 君子will not become a vessel. Okay, it doesn't have the certain specific use technique. It has a broad, general, higher Dao, okay, of learning. So that's the this chapter. Amang, please.
Yeah, the only thing I really want to point out here is Lege's choice to translate Dao in this chapter as where did it go? The utmost of his principles. It's interesting. It's not inaccurate, but it is a very interesting expression of Dao in a particular translation because it fits, but you see how much is lost by it only being that, even though he uses the word utmost. And that to me is why here, if anywhere, a capital T Dao makes sense, because what Zixia is talking about is reaching the Dao, what his master preached and taught about human relations and the way we ought to be together. This is that utmost sort of goal. This is also why I will sort of use this moment to support our argument for sometimes you need to retain the original Chinese because what is contained in the word may be larger than what one translator decides to interpret it as. And you can start to see how this becomes a polemic word between Confucius and Taoist scholars who will use the same word with the same sort of high ideal, but with very, very, very different connotation.
Yeah, thank you, Amam. And just recently, I also read the pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus, the writing, right? So same as logos, right? So some translation will put as rationality. Okay, some will put as a reason. Some will use words. Okay, so they all misrepresent. Same as Aristotle talk about nous. Some translate as mind, some translate as intuition. Okay, they all, or some translate as intelligence. So, so for the able reader, I think we should retain the original word. And I think, in our opinion, that's better. Okay. Anyway, thank you. Joe and Kwok, please.
Yeah, I mean, what I kind of just initially just see here is this idea of a workshop, as opposed to actually having some foundational framework actually to approaching life. So you have an actual philosophy that you are able to obtain wisdom, as opposed to actually just having a craft. And I would look at this as the Quan would say, correct me if I'm wrong, Quan, in the middle of the triagram. So that the idea of having this, having knowledge of things, of how things are actually done, you can have a craft, but actually to truly be wise and to understand what wise wisdom really is, that you really, how to live in accordance with the Tao. That would fundamentally require a philosophical approach to life being itself. Which I would argue is, this is also coming back to this element of how understanding ourselves and how we interact with others, as well as the ethical implications on how we interact. So you have a fundamental understanding of why you have a craft in the first place, as opposed to not necessarily just having a craft for to have a craft. So I think that it essentially gets to the deeper level question as to existence itself. And again, once you have that, you're living much more intentionally. And there's something else there that's discovered that's very important, is the idea of purpose. So purpose is then found in your work, as opposed to it just being work. So.
Thank you, Joe. Kwang, please.
Here, I would like to come back again to the distinction that Jason made 2 minutes ago between the fact that it's true that in ancient China there was a very distinct, let's say, discrimination between the people working with their hands and the people working with their mind. Okay, and it is clear that the born aristocrat consider, for all kind of reasons that can be very debatable nowadays, that they don't have to do manual works, and it's their destiny to work with their minds and to plan and to create strategies and so on. So I think that here Zixia was truly speaking of that, okay? Because once again, in all of the Analects, sometimes the Junzi has to be understood as the man of superior epistemological development or the man of high social status. Of course, the men of high social status at that time, they all thought that they have high epistemological development, right? Even if it can be debatable, of course. But what is extraordinary once again with Confucius, that Confucius made it, of course, before Confucius, people with common sense made the difference between a man born into the aristocracy and a man having a high epistemological development. But with Confucius, that common sense evidence has been, let's say, clearly enunciated, clearly asserted. So that Confucius said that yes, someone can be born into the high aristocracy, but might not be a Junzi in the epistemological meaning of the word. And the epistemological Junzi is the true Junzi and not the guy born into the high aristocracy, because once again, Junzi, at the very basic meaning of that two characters, simply means the son of a lord, okay, meaning a born aristocrat. I would like also to remind everyone that the English word the gentleman at the beginning was a word used to indicate a born aristocrat in England. And I think it's only with the end of the 19th century, maybe the beginning of the 20th century, that gentleman began to be used simply to indicate someone who is refined and educated. So Junzi and gentleman had the same evolution, if I may say so. I stop here.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You know, when you read the Jane Austen's novel, you know, they constantly ask, right? And you know, is he a gentleman? Okay, it doesn't mean he's a polite man. It means he has a certain kind of status. Even during the late 19th century, I believe, you know, they still use this concept, you know. So anyway,
To make a tie-in for you, Quan, just because you were mentioning this sort of time frame, it's around the same time where the term bachelor started to indicate someone ready to present in polite society, as opposed to simply an unmarried person. That is why, to this day, your undergraduate degree is called a bachelor's degree. You have now elevated yourself to a position to be presented in polite society. That's at least the sort of underlying tone of it. And I think Confucius would actually approve of that, ironically.
I think so. I think Confucius will
Absolutely.
agree on that. I think Confucius will appreciate the so-called bachelor concept because you lift people up, okay, to a certain degree, you know. Thank you, everyone. We can move on because right now every chapter is very short, and that unlike the previous one, book 18 is long, and I have to admit a little bit boring on book 18 because they all historical background. Probably only Kwang know the detail and the historical. But right now, you know, it's a very interesting discussion. So let's go to chapter 8. Okay, Kwang, please.
Okay, 19.8, translation by Professor Robert Eno. Zhang said, when a small man commits an error, he will always make excuses.
Thank you, Kwang. Anyone want to read Legis?
Yeah, I go ahead and read it. Zhang said, the mean man is sure to gloss his faults.
Just a minute. Okay, it's very short.
Yeah.
Book
Yeah.
19, chapter 8. Zhang said, when a small man errs, he always decorates, disguises it.
I think the message is quite clear, and only difference is 小人. Okay, so that Legis translates as mean man, small man. I consider with a small man, which is opposite to 君子 we just discussed. So usually we try not to, at least in my interpretation, I try not to take 小人, small man, as a mean man or a bad person. Basically, he is not 君子, either not qualified or not intentional to become a 君子. Okay, so that's the thing. And the important thing is this word. Okay, usually I translate as a cultural, and translate as a pattern. But this word here is different. Even the writing are the same, but the pronunciation is different. Okay, so that means it's a verb. Okay, you gloss over, or you want to call it decorated, and then, or you want to call it disguise. Okay, that's all. Like Dr. Eno translated, find excuse. Okay, that's also the good way. I think that find excuse is good translation to talk. Translation by its meaning, but I decide not to use it because the word 问 means doing something on top of something. Okay, so I will prefer disguise or decoration. Okay, decorate. Yeah, Aman, please.
Yeah, I don't have much to add here other than as with any language, sometimes homophones can trip us up. And when is one of those homophones that here is easy to say, oh, it means the same thing as, and it's not actually homophone. It would be the same as, the term escapes me, but bank, for example, in English can have multiple meanings. When has multiple meanings here. And this is closer to that second meaning that Jason put in the notes. To decorate, to drape, to conceal in some way. And yeah, here we have Zhang, though, who is extolled. Do not be a scholar, do for small men. He's now gained a lot of insight into into what small men are, and therefore he's now able to impart that to his students, saying, this is what to be on the lookout for, because this is what the master told me to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, thank you, Aman. We have hands up from Joe and Kwang. Okay, Joe, please.
Yeah, just really quickly, from this passage, I think if you look at was it 19.6, where at least the Legge translation included something, with sincerity. And this is the point that I was kind of making with 19.6, is that the idea of sincerity is someone that is actually being honest with themselves. Therefore, they're actually able to interact with others. Therefore, somebody that actually overlooks their faults is actually not being honest with themselves. This speaks to the importance of sincerity within that process. So when you're actually engaging with others, again, if you're looking at yourself and you're saying, well, then there's nothing wrong, then you're actually going to have a devaluation of the other individual's contributions. And so from that perspective, you're seeing a little bit of a trend here. Here is the opposite of what we were seeing a moment ago for the individual that is doing the introspective work in an honest fashion.
Thank you, Joe. One thing I'd like to mention here is here talk about small man and will try to disguise his mistake. And according to Mencius, okay, I think it's Mencius, talk about Zilu. Zilu, when he has mistake, he's happy. Okay. So I think you can see the different kind of situation. You have happy, not because I'm happy to do something wrong, because that's the chance I can improve myself. You can say a different kind of personality and a different kind of way of teaching.
Yeah, I think that this gets to this other idea of learning as well. So that's the personal growth aspect.
Yeah.
So the idea of failure is actually inevitable, that you're going to incorporate the failure. And that's, again, the previous person that was actually dealing in terms of principles, that they're actually working in that with a framework, with actually understanding that failure is inevitably part of life, as opposed to the individual that's just looking at a workshop level, more or less at a more functional level, that actually failure is really much more meaningful. It's not about the journey, it's about the task. So the individual that has an understanding as to why they're doing something in the first place and living intentionally would actually have a framework for dealing with that. But you're right, glossing over those mistakes is the difference between looking at the mistake as an opportunity for learning and growth, as opposed to actually looking at the mistake as something that is overvaluing the results.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Joe. Kwang, please.
I will be very brief. Here, I think that is the perfect illustration of the upper trigram versus the lower trigram. Because lower trigram precisely is the capacity to use the intellect for making excuses. If you don't have the upper trigram activated, meaning the presence of infinite awareness, if you have the presence of infinite awareness, you would not use the power of your intellect, a quality of the lower trigram, for making excuses. You will simply change your bad behavior. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. Any other comment? Okay, great. Let's move to chapter 9. Kwang, please.
Okay, so Professor Robert Eno's translation, 19.9, Zixia said, a Junzi goes through 3 transformations. When you view him from afar, he is awesome. When you approach him, he's warm. When you hear his words, he is demanding.
Thank you, Kwang. Joe?
Yeah, yep, sure. Zhang said, the superior man undergoes 3 changes. Looked at from a distance, he appears stern. When approached, he is mild. When he is heard to speak, his language is firm and decided. Sorry about that.
What's the last word? Undecided?
No,
And decided.
and decided. Yeah,
Okay.
I did kind of conflate that a little bit.
Okay, this one is interesting. So that's Among, please, chapter.
Book 19, Chapter 9. Zisha said, a junzi appears in 3 different variations. From afar, he looks solemn. Close up, he feels gentle. Listening to him, his words are dignified.
Thank you. Among, here's the word I struggle with the translation. 变 means change. So in this sense, Legi is precise, correct. 变 means change. But Junzi has changed 3 times. It sounds a little bit strange, right? Transformation, I think that's Legi's way. And I think about doing the 3 phases. Okay, but it doesn't reflect the real world. So I think Among suggests a variation that probably make kind of meaning reflect the meaning of 变 these words. Okay, so I don't want sounds like 3 changes. That mean he's this, he's this, he's this. So inconsistent. Okay, so that's what I'm going to talk about. So I'm further explaining is when you look at afar, he's solemn. Okay, 俨然, and you feel he's gentle. And when you listen to him, he's dignified. Li, okay. So Li, this word dignified is important. Sometimes you want to translate as harsh. It's like Li original means the whetstone, right? You can sharp your knife, so it's kind of very hard, unchanged. That means it's principled. Okay, that's the meaning. 朱熹, oh no, not 朱熹. That's 朱熹is a teacher. Cheng Hao, Cheng Yi, I think is the younger brother. He made a good comment, talk about usually if people are gentle, cannot be dignified, or dignified cannot be gentle. So only Confucius can be both. That's Cheng Hao, Cheng Yi talking about this. That's his comment is come down the 10th century, okay, over some 1,000 years later. So that's the I need to say now. Okay, Among, please.
I will admit that this chapter takes me out of China and into Japan, because the Japanese are infamous for axiom that they say everyone has 3 faces: the one they show the world, the one they show their close friends and family, and the 3rd face they never show anyone. The reason I bring that up is because it does feel easy to map that here with the 3 variations. What you see from afar, the face that the world sees, which is solemn, the face that those close to you see, which is gentle. And when they speak words, here it's indicating that something is arising internally from somebody. And so it's an expression internally that nobody necessarily knows all of the motivation and machination behind, but they can feel it. That's why it says it, therefore it's dignified. It may actually be the case that this simple chapter was what later influenced Japan to adopt that sort of maxim that they just spread amongst the culture. But it does seem interesting to me. And as far as Zushi's comment that only Confucius can have it all, I disagree with the man. Just sorry, I do.
All right, thank you. At least Among has made it. Confucius is not the only one. Okay, let's go to Kwang first, then Joe. Kwang, please.
Okay, so I want to say that Amon is absolutely right to say that Cheng Yi is wrong, because it is absolutely possible to be the 3 depending of the context and of the people with whom you interact. And being sincere at the same time, of course, that is the major thing. Because once again, and I am sorry, it's my favorite concept, so I always use that concept because I think it's very synthetic and at the same time detailed. Once again, the upper trigram and the lower trigram. Because if the Junzi, the gentleman, has a being, because I think once again, it's always about being, but 19.9 is a lot more about being, okay? If you have that inner presence that is given by the presence of infinite awareness, when you are far, you would have, okay, I use the word chosen by Professor Eno, awesome, meaning dignified. And when you are close with someone talking about specific details of a specific situation, you will show by your attitude to that person that you are run precisely, because I think that it's three manifestation of run, in the sense that uh, in the midst of a crowd, you know how to deport yourself with dignity and being awesome. Once again, using the extreme word chosen by Professor Eno. But when you interact one-on-one, you show your run, the presence of being in you, by being courteous, respectful, attentive to what the other has to say to you, or to offer you advice, or anyway something that you can offer that person. And when you speak, your words are clear and dignified and spot on, if I may say so. Meaning that once again, if your words are clear, dignified, and spot on, it is because, once again, of the presence of infinite awareness. Okay, you heard what the other has to say, you understood what he had said, and you offered your advice with clarity and kindness. So once again, it's three modes of a run, and that run is possible because you have that presence of infinite awareness. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. Joe, please.
Oh yeah, so I'm unmuted. Yeah, no, I mean, I think in this particular instance, it's also the element of being you can't have some of these things in a vacuum. That's the way I would look at it. But it's also this element of awareness that Kwon was talking about. All of these things have to be done at the proper time. So when you're speaking sternly, or with confidence, you can't have a complete misunderstanding as to what you're talking about at that point. So and be meaningful. So you could be like, you could say it that way, but it requires an awareness, which actually then would mean that your timing by which you're saying these things. And so that's an important part, because you're considering that what is it then that makes somebody consistent? And when they're consistent, they have clarity as to how they're approaching something. So again, I think this is also coming back to some ideas about having principles, and understanding as to how to approach a particular or a way of living, actually. So again, I mean, it's more about, to me, being essentially good in all things.
Thank you, Joe. One thing I'd like to mention, kind of similar in this one. This one, I think it's important. It's talking about Confucius is gentle or warm, right? When you close to him, and his word is dignified. On the book, I think it's the book 17, Yang Huo is talking about somebody, which we mean is in the outside, 设立内人. Okay, so it means somebody is look dignified, but the inside is like soft, okay, like a straw. Okay, so I think that's the very important situation, subtle difference here. you want feel soft and warm when people close you, but not you only on the surface is harsh and dignified, but inside has no principle. Okay, I just want to make this one, the subtle difference is Confucius think, or Confucius disciple 子夏, there is a subtle difference. You need to be soft, but the soft side or the warm side is when people close you, they feel warm, okay, comfortable, not inside yourself, okay, in your internal self is soft, means no principle, okay. So I think that's the difference. If you can see on the book, I think.
Yeah, actually, can I respond to that? Because I think that that's an important part. You're talking about the internal and the external, right?
Yeah.
And so that is an important part. So like one of my favorite poems is the poem If you could walk with kings nor lose touch with the common man. So this idea, the ability to move in between these two, between hard and soft, is also an idea of awareness. So it is a principled approach in the saying that you're actually having a framework for actually applying this to such circumstances. You're not necessarily, and this comes back to this idea of consistency. So that where your consistency is with an awareness, you're meeting somebody where they are. So it's an internal and external relationship. In addition to what you were just, yeah. So I mean, I agree with what you were saying. It's like self and other. So I wouldn't necessarily separate the two.
Right. Thank you, Joe. Kwang, please.
Yes, I will be very brief because it's in the same direction than what Jason and Joe said. It's about precisely that in being, you cannot fake it till you make it. Okay, in being, you truly have to develop precisely that inner power of being that will shine out. And it is precisely a domain that you cannot fake it till you make it, but you have to develop that inner presence of infinite awareness. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. Mark, please.
Jason, can you put your and Aman's translation back up for a sec?
Okay.
I'm just comparing where the change takes place.
Okay, here. I think I'm glad that you asked this question. Okay, 三变. Okay, that's the change. Okay, so technically I should translate it as change. But if you read the sentence, a Junzi appears in three different changes. It sounds like he has inconsistent personality, right?
Well, I wasn't really thinking about that. I was thinking that in the Leggy translation, he says that the superior man undergoes three changes.
Okay.
Now, I don't think that the Junzi is changing. I think it's the perception of the Junzi that is changing.
Okay, I take it. I don't know. Anyone have any comment on this?
That's actually part of the reason I suggested variation, because it doesn't imply, it does capture the wording of the meaning of yang, but at the same time, it doesn't indicate some sort of like evolutionary steps or metamorphosis. It's merely a difference of perspective.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's
so yeah. I mean, I think I agree with what Aman had just actually shared there. It's not this metamorphosis that is actually going on. This is the change that is actually particular to a circumstance. So, but there is consistency in that the circumstances are properly applied. So you can undergo a change based on when it's necessary. You're able to meet people where they're at. Otherwise, you would actually be consistent all the time with the same type of behavior. In other words, if I were being consistent with just one way of speaking sternly, that wouldn't have awareness, because I would actually just be speaking sternly all the time, and it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate. So this ability to change is this hardness and softness, as you were saying, Jason, initially, or would it be the ability to go in between those two? When X happens, I can meet people with softness. When Y happens, I can meet them with stern behavior, but it's not some evolution per se,
Yeah, one way to
in
look
my
at
opinion.
Yeah, I think that's difficult because according to the text, right, it looks like the Junzi has never changed. Okay, it's just all the way the same way. So technically, variation changes are all wrong because Junzi never change because you as the person feels difference, right? When you is far away with this person, you see he's stern. Okay, he is solemn. Okay, but when you get close to him, sit next to him, you feel warm, right? When he speak, his words is dignified. Okay, it's harsh, it's principled. I think that's the way to it.
Well, I mean, so I think that there's the circumstances and the individual, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what we're talking about here. So, we're talking about and then, yeah, that's the only distinction that I would make is one's particular and one's universal.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. Kwang and Paul, please.
Yes, I just want to say that it's true that we have to take into account that Pian truly means to transform or to change, okay? But the word in transform in English will trigger in us the idea of inner transformation,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily the case. Here, the inner is not transformed. The inner is stable and constant because that is precisely the presence of inner infinite awareness. Once again, the key word that has been pronounced many times in the last 10 minutes is evolution. The evolution has already been done. But here, the transformation or the pian, the change, are external changes adapting to different situation that the Junzi will manifest a different kind of face or different kind of deportment because that face and that deportment would be appropriate for that social situation. But what is constant is his inner infinite awareness, and that evolution happened already in his past. I stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Kwang. Yeah, one way I'm thinking is mode. Okay, that's another way to think about 3 modes. But then I kind of think about how can I connect the mode with the Chinese word change, 变, right? That's another thing. So anyway, that's no.
But Jason, I think you have a good idea because modes mean a certain way to appear or a certain way to manifest. Okay.
And they usually depend change by situation. But my dilemma here is this, because how are you going to connect English word mode with Chinese word 变? Okay, that's a thing.
Well, mode in English has a meaning of a certain manifestation depending of the circumstances. So the concept of change there's an undertone of the concept of change in mode. So I think that is quite appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so thank you. I just want to share, Among and I, we go through many thought process, and sometimes it's difficult. And I really appreciate when we present here and we see different idea, and then that's very valuable. And I don't believe any translator went through this kind of process. Paul, please.
Yeah, I can see you went through a lot of machinations on this. I'm focusing right now on the word dignified.
Okay.
And
that's a good word to discuss. I'm happy.
Okay, well, my thought about it, like if I compare it to demanding, which I think the first translation was demanding, I don't remember one of the translations, the other word, but this is the one of the words that implied to me, and I'm curious if it implies to you, and if it's part of why you chose it or it doesn't apply this to you, it implies an inner state of the speaker, of the one who's doing the words. The word demanding sort of does not, I don't remember the other word, but when I think of dignity, I might relate it to my experience with the elder community, where there's a concern about robbing people of their dignity. And that means robbing them of a autonomous inner state that's almost like the Japanese concept that they get to keep. They have their dignity, they have their presence. And that is in that word, unlike in the other words chosen. I'm just wondering if you were thinking along those lines or not about that.
Well, the put this way, I have another consideration. I look at the Chinese character and I want to the word is close enough to that Chinese word. So the Chinese word is li. That means the whetstone. Okay, you use that one to sharpen your knife. Okay, so that's the word. So technically, I should translate as harsh. Okay, as hard as a stone. Okay, something like this. But I don't want like his words is harsh, right? So I disagree on demanding, because demanding sounds, well, first, it's a demanding, it's not the right word. Secondly, it's too far away from the whetstone. Okay, we call demanding. Okay, so again, I open to any kind of suggestion because I struggle with the right
So
word.
I dropped this one into the chat too, but not the full breakdown of the etymology. Please
Severe,
don't make
yeah,
me.
severe.
Yeah. Severe is probably the most literal direct translation of li to English, but severe in your words. Okay, I can see how Leggy gets from that to what was his
Demand, what's the
Leggy was, yeah, his language is firm and decided, which, okay, that's kind of a softball severe, but I think dignified actually captures the notions both of the strength and intensity of this, but without losing what is fundamentally a Junsa's necessary character.
Can I add a question? Did you say whetstone like you sharpen a knife, Jason?
Yeah.
But see, that relates to what I'm talking about, because a whetstone doesn't get hurt by the knife. A whetstone has its own integrity. You
Yeah.
pick the stone that is harder than anything that touches it. It has its own integrity.
Yes.
So I think that's in that word.
Yeah, and another thing is I'd like to share is I give myself another requirement is I try to use the same word whenever it appears the same in the same. So 7 chapters, book 17, 12. Okay, 色厉而内人. I translate as one who is dignified in appearance but feeble within. Okay, so the same word li. So I will try my best to keep consistent with the same Chinese, with the same English. That's add another layer of difficulty here. So, so in this moment, or by all this consideration, that's why I choose dignify, because I try to use the same English word for the same Chinese word. Huang, please.
Speaking of whetstone and dignify, why not sharp? Because in sharp, you have the notion of dignified, precise, and severe. But
Does this
it's
sound
debatable.
too negative? Does this sound too negative? Is my words too sharp? Does sounds a little bit negative?
No, because sharp is a word that is very broad in the semantic field. Okay, it means precise. It means a little bit severe, but it means dignify and precise too. But anyway, dignify, I like it too. So it's very debatable.
Sharp also has mental connotations attached to it. And so when you say that somebody is speaking sharply, you could mean that they're speaking meanly. You could also mean, wow, they're really intelligent in what they say. And so,
Yeah,
pardon
and
the
then
pun, but it's kind of a double-edged sword.
if I use the sharp in the book 17, that means the person appears sharp in the was sharp in appearance. Okay, and feeble within. That would be a little bit strange because
No, Jason. On the contrary, because in modern English, when you say that someone appears sharp in appearance but feeble inside, it transmits exactly the meaning of that paragraph. Okay, meaning
okay, then
he looks cool outside, but when you know him deeper, his appearance is more shining than what he truly is. Okay, that's the meaning of that paragraph.
yeah, I will take a consideration. Thank you very much. But okay, so I'm afraid I have to stop here today, and then I have some engagement I have to leave, and I will leave the. So we finish on the book 19, chapter
9.
9, right? So we start from 10. We will try to probably take 10 more, 2 more or 3 more section to finish the book 19. And this, I think that's book 19 even has no Confucius said, no master said. That's all his 5 disciples said, but it provides us a pretty good review on the whole book because we will see different voice when they learn or retransmit Confucius' teaching. So the sentence in general is pretty easy to understand, and we can have a lot of discussion. I really appreciate this opportunity, kind of as a review. So the next 2 weeks, both Amang and me are going to take off. So we will skip 2 weeks, and October 15th, we will continue. Okay, on the book 9.